Amara Monroe stood alone in her kitchen at 11 o'clock at night, the only light coming from the phone in her trembling hands. A phone that wasn't hers. Her husband Gregory's phone, left carelessly on the granite countertop while he ran out to grab something from his car. And on that screen was a text message that would shatter 27 years of marriage in an instant. "Can't wait to tell her tonight. You're worth the risk, baby." The words blurred as Amara's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. And then she heard it. The sound of his car pulling into the driveway. He was coming back inside, and Amara had about 30 seconds to decide who she was going to be in the next moment of her life. 27 years. That's how long Amara had been married to Gregory Monroe. More than a quarter century of shared dreams, raised children and built memories. They'd met at a medical conference in Chicago back when Amara was 35 and thriving as a pharmaceutical sales representative. She was good at her job, excellent actually, consistently ranking in the top 5% of her region. Gregory had been a rising cardiologist, brilliant and ambitious, with kind eyes and a laugh that made her feel like the only woman in the room. Their courtship was a whirlwind of stolen weekends and late-night phone calls across state lines. Within a year they were married. Within 2, they'd relocated to Asheville, North Carolina, where Gregory had accepted a prestigious position at the regional medical center. That's when the negotiations began. Small ones at first. Could Amara maybe work remotely a few days a week? Gregory's schedule was so demanding, and he really needed her support as he established himself. Then their daughter Sienna was born, and suddenly the conversation shifted. Wouldn't it be better if Amara stayed home, at least for a few years? Gregory's career was taking off, and someone needed to be there for their daughter. Amara agreed, telling herself it was temporary, that she'd return to work once Sienna was in school. But then came Julian, their son, just 2 years later. And Gregory's career continued its upward trajectory, demanding more of his time, more of his energy, more of their family's complete support structure. So Amara became what so many women before her had become, the woman behind the successful man. She hosted dinner parties for Gregory's colleagues, attended hospital fundraisers in designer dresses, volunteered on charity boards that elevated Gregory's social standing. She managed their beautiful home in the historic Montford district, coordinated the children's activities, and made sure Gregory never had to worry about anything outside the hospital walls. Sienna grew into a passionate environmental lawyer, currently making waves at a firm in Seattle. Julian was studying architecture in Barcelona, sending home photos of gaudy buildings and Spanish sunsets. Amara was proud of them both, proud of the life she and Gregory had built together. But recently something had shifted. Started about 6 months ago, subtle at first. Gregory working later than usual. His explanations vague and distracted. Then came the new cologne, something woodsy and expensive that Amara hadn't picked out. The sudden gym membership. The attention to his appearance that went beyond professional necessity. New shirts. Tighter pants. A haircut from a trendy salon downtown instead of his regular barber of 15 years. When Amara asked about these changes, Gregory brushed her off with talk about turning 55, wanting to stay healthy, needing stress relief. She'd wanted to believe him. God, how desperately she'd wanted to believe him. Tonight was supposed to be their 27th wedding anniversary. Amara had made reservations at the marketplace, the same restaurant where Gregory had proposed all those years ago. She'd bought a new dress, navy blue with delicate lace at the shoulders, and spent an hour on her hair and makeup. She'd been ready by 6, excited, hopeful that maybe this dinner would reconnect them, bridge whatever distance had grown between them. And then at 6:15, her phone had buzzed with a text from Gregory. Have to work late. Emergency case. Can we reschedule? No apology. No acknowledgement that this was their anniversary. Just a cold, casual cancellation. Amara had taken off the dress, washed her face, and tried to convince herself that emergencies happened, that saving lives was more important than dinner reservations. But something nagged at her, an instinct she couldn't quite silence. So when Gregory came home at 10:30, claiming exhaustion and headed straight for the shower, Amara found herself doing something she'd never done before. She looked at his phone. He'd left it on the counter, so confident in her trust that he hadn't even bothered to take it with him. And that's when she found the messages. Dozens of them. All from someone named Bethany. The front door opened, and Gregory's footsteps echoed through the hallway. Amara set his phone down on the counter, positioning it carefully, deliberately, right in the center where he couldn't miss it. She stood across from it, arms folded. Her face composed into a mask of eerie calm even as her heart hammered against her ribs. Gregory walked into the kitchen, whistling softly, and stopped dead when he saw her. Saw her face. Saw the phone. "Amara, you're still up. I thought you'd be asleep by now." She didn't move, didn't speak. Just watched him as recognition dawned in his eyes. He'd realized what she'd done, what she'd seen. His hand went to his pocket instinctively, finding it empty, and his face paled. "Who's Bethany?" The question hung in the air between them like smoke. Gregory's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She watched him cycle through his options in real time, saw him consider lying, then dismissing it, then landing on something worse than a lie. Justification. "Amara, it's not what you think." "I think it's exactly what I think, Gregory." "Who is she?" He ran a hand through his hair, that same gesture he'd used for 27 years when he was stressed, and somehow seeing it now made everything worse. This familiar man, this stranger. "She's a surgical resident at the hospital." It's complicated, Amara. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, the stress. Bethany, she makes me feel alive again. She makes me feel young. If you're watching this and can't believe what you're hearing, make sure you hit that subscribe button because what happens next will absolutely shock you. Amara felt something crack inside her chest, but her voice remained steady. "Bethany Cortland. 29 years old. I saw the messages, Gregory. All of them. The plans you've been making. The lies you've been telling." Gregory's face hardened then, the guilt transforming into something uglier. Defensiveness. Entitlement. "What did you expect, Amara? You've let yourself go. We barely talk anymore. All you care about is your garden club and your book club and what color to paint the guest bathroom. I need more than that. I deserve more than that." The cruelty of it took her breath away. 27 years of sacrifice, of putting his career first, of raising his children and managing his home and being his perfect accessory, reduced to complaints about her appearance and her hobbies. But Amara didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just looked at this man she'd loved for more than half her adult life and barely recognized him. "How long? Does it matter? How long, Gregory?" He sighed like she was being unreasonable, like she was the problem. 8 months. And before you start with the guilt and the drama, I want you to know that I've already made my decision. I want a divorce. I've already spoken to a lawyer. Papers will be drawn up by the end of the week. The floor seemed to tilt beneath Amara's feet. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was planned. Calculated. He'd been laying the groundwork for months while she'd been worried about him, while she'd been trying to give him space, while she'd been blaming herself for the distance between them. "On our anniversary," she heard herself say, her voice barely above a whisper. "You decided to tell me this on our anniversary." Gregory had the decency to flinch, but he didn't apologize. "I didn't plan the timing. But yes, I guess that's how it worked out. Look, we can be adults about this. We'll split things fairly. You can keep the house. I'll make sure you're taken care of." Taken care of. Like she was a pet or a dependent, not a partner who'd sacrificed everything for his success. But Amara didn't argue. Not yet. Instead, she picked up his phone and handed it to him. Her fingers steady despite the chaos raging inside her. "We'll talk about this tomorrow, Gregory. I need tonight to think." He looked surprised, perhaps expecting tears or begging or anger. But Amara gave him none of those things. She simply turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving him standing there with his phone and his guilt and his precious Bethany waiting on the other end of all those messages. What would you do if you discovered your spouse of 27 years was having an affair? Would you fight or would you walk away? Let us know in the comments below. Because what Gregory didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have known as he watched his wife walk calmly up those stairs, was that Amara Monroe wasn't the helpless, dependent woman he thought she was. She'd been preparing for this moment, in ways even she hadn't fully realized, for years. And the conversation they were going to have tomorrow, it wasn't going to go anything like Gregory expected. Amara climbed the stairs to their home office, each step measured and deliberate, and closed the door behind her with a soft click that felt louder than a slam. The room was dark except for the glow of streetlights filtering through the plantation shutters, casting shadows across the mahogany desk that had once belonged to her father. She sat down in the leather chair, the same chair where she'd balanced checkbooks and paid bills and managed the household finances for 27 years, and she did not cry. She did not scream into a pillow or call her sister or pour herself a glass of wine. Instead, Amara Monroe opened her laptop and began to plan. Because here's what Gregory didn't know about his wife. Here's what he'd never bothered to ask or notice or care about in all their years together. Before Amara became Mrs. Gregory Monroe, before she became the perfect doctor's wife with a beautiful home and the impeccable dinner parties, she had been someone else entirely. At 34, Amara Chen, as she was known then, had been the rising star of Meridian Pharmaceuticals' oncology division. She'd closed deals that her male counterparts couldn't touch, built relationships with hospital networks across the Southeast, and had been explicitly told by the VP of sales that she was being groomed for his position when he retired in 3 years. 3 years. That's all she'd needed to wait. She was already making 6 figures, already building a name for herself in an industry dominated by men who underestimated her right up until she outperformed them. She had a corner office with a view, a company car, and stock options that would have made her independently wealthy by 40. The trajectory of her life had been crystal clear, and it was pointed straight up. And then she'd met Gregory at that medical conference in Chicago. Charming Gregory with his kind eyes and his passionate speeches about saving lives. Gregory who'd pursued her relentlessly, who'd sent flowers to her hotel room and rearranged his schedule to attend her presentations. Gregory who'd made her feel like she could have both the career and the love story. For the first 2 years of their marriage, she'd thought she could. She'd thought they were partners, equals, 2 ambitious professionals building a life together. But then Sienna happened. Not happened, that wasn't fair. Sienna was wanted and loved and planned for. But with Sienna came the conversations. Could Amara maybe work from home more often? Gregory's schedule at the hospital was so unpredictable, and they really needed someone reliable for the baby. Amara had agreed, believing it was temporary, believing Gregory when he said he understood how important her career was. She'd negotiated for remote work, taken on accounts she could manage from home, hired a nanny for the days she needed to travel. And it had worked for a while. Until Gregory came home one evening when Sienna was 18 months old, loosened his tie, and said the words that would reshape Amara's entire future. "I've been thinking. This isn't working, you traveling so much. Sienna needs her mother. And honestly, Amara, I need you too. My career is at a critical point. The chief of cardiology position is opening up in 2 years, and I need to be positioned for it. I need a wife who can support me, who can host the right people, make the right connections. We don't need your income. My salary is more than enough. What do you say?" What did she say? She'd said yes. 'Cause she loved him. Because she believed in his dream. Because society had taught her that a good wife supported her husband's ambitions. And because a tiny, insidious voice in her head whispered that maybe she couldn't actually have it all. Maybe something had to give. And if Gregory's career could support them both, wasn't it logical for hers to be the sacrifice? So Amara Chen, who'd been 3 years away from a vice presidency, resigned from Meridian Pharmaceuticals and became Amara Monroe, full-time mother and doctor's wife. She'd thrown herself into the role with the same excellence she'd brought to her career. If she was going to be a stay-at-home mother, she'd be exceptional at it. She'd joined the right committees, hosted the right parties, cultivated relationships with the wives of hospital board members and local politicians. She'd made herself indispensable to Gregory's climb up the ladder, all while raising 2 children who were kind and ambitious and everything parents hoped their kids would be. But Amara had learned something from her father, something Gregory had never known about. Her father, Thomas Chen, had been a quiet man, an immigrant from Taiwan who'd built a successful import business through careful planning and strategic thinking. When he'd died 7 years ago, he'd left Amara an inheritance of $800,000 with a note that said simply, "For your independence. Use it wisely." And she had. For 15 years, while Gregory had been focused on his career and his reputation and apparently on 29-year-old surgical residents, Amara had been quietly, methodically, building her own financial empire. She'd started small, investing in pharmaceutical companies she understood from her old career, tech startups that reminded her of her own missed opportunities, real estate properties in up-and-coming neighborhoods. She'd spent hours researching, attending online webinars, joining investment groups under her maiden name. She'd been careful, strategic, patient. She'd reinvested her earnings, diversified her portfolio, taken calculated risks that paid off more often than not. And over 15 years, that $800,000 had grown into $4.2 million that existed in accounts Gregory didn't know about, in investments he'd never asked about, in a financial identity completely separate from their marriage. Why had she done it? Even Amara wasn't entirely sure. It hadn't been suspicion of infidelity, not consciously. It had been something deeper, something her father's note had awakened in her. A recognition that dependence, no matter how comfortable, was still dependence. A understanding that the woman who controls nothing controls her own fate least of all. She'd called it her just-in-case money. Just in case the market crashed. Just in case Gregory's practice failed. Just in case she ever needed to leave. Just in case her husband of 27 years decided she wasn't young enough, pretty enough, exciting enough anymore. Tonight, sitting in her father's chair, Amara pulled up her investment dashboard and looked at the numbers that represented her secret life. $4.2 million. Money that Gregory thought didn't exist. Money that meant she wasn't the helpless, dependent woman he was about to treat like a charity case in divorce proceedings. She took a screenshot of her portfolio summary and saved it to an encrypted folder. Then she opened a new document and began making lists. What she knew. What she needed to find out. Who she needed to call. Amara Monroe might have sacrificed her career, but she hadn't sacrificed her mind. And right now that mind was working with the cold precision of someone who'd spent decades negotiating deals and managing complex logistics. By the time the sun rose over the Blue Ridge Mountains, Amara had a plan. The next morning, Gregory came down to breakfast acting like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't destroyed their marriage 12 hours earlier. Like he hadn't admitted to an 8-month affair and announced his intention to divorce her. He poured himself coffee, checked his phone, scrolled through emails, the picture of a man with a clear conscience. "I have back-to-back surgeries today," he said casually, not quite meeting her eyes. "But we should talk later. About logistics. How we want to handle this." Amara stood at the stove, making scrambled eggs she had no intention of eating, and smiled. Actually smiled. "Of course, darling. Whenever you have time. I know how busy you are." Gregory looked relieved, almost surprised by her composure. He'd probably expected tears, hysterics, desperate pleas for him to reconsider. The fact that he got none of those things should have worried him, but Gregory had spent so many years underestimating his wife that he no longer recognized danger when it was standing in front of him wearing a bathrobe and making breakfast. He kissed her cheek on his way out, a gesture so absurdly normal that Amara almost laughed. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, she picked up her phone and dialed her daughter. Sienna answered on the second ring. "Mom, hey, it's early. Everything okay?" Amara kept her voice steady, calm, giving nothing away yet. "Sienna, sweetie, I need some legal advice. Do you have a few minutes?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Amara could practically hear her daughter's lawyer brain engaging. Sienna had inherited her mother's intelligence and her ability to read between lines. Legal advice. Mom, what's going on? Did something happen? I just need to understand my options in a hypothetical situation. If a married couple in North Carolina were to divorce after 27 years, and one spouse had sacrificed their career to support the other, what would that look like financially? Another pause, longer this time. When Sienna spoke again, her voice had changed, sharpened. Mom, is Dad having an affair? Amara closed her eyes. Her brilliant, perceptive daughter. I'd rather not go into details over the phone. But yes, I need to understand what my rights are. What I'm entitled to. How to protect myself. Oh my God. Mom, I'm so sorry. Okay, listen to me. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Don't make any verbal commitments. Do you understand? North Carolina has very specific laws about marital property and alimony, especially in cases of marital misconduct. You need representation, and you need documentation of everything. They talked for 20 more minutes. Sienna's fury barely contained as she outlined what Amara needed to do, who she needed to hire, what evidence she needed to gather. By the time they hung up, Amara had a legal framework to match her financial strategy. But there was one more call she needed to make. Amara scrolled through her contacts until she found a name she'd saved 2 years ago at a charity fundraiser for the Children's Hospital. Diane Kowalski, forensic accountant, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s who'd spent 30 years tracking money for divorce attorneys and corporate fraud cases. They'd sat together at a silent auction, bonded over their shared frustration with the bland chicken being served, and exchanged cards with a casual promise to have lunch sometime. They'd never had that lunch. But Amara remembered Diane saying, "If you ever need to know where money is hiding, I'm your woman." The phone rang 4 times before a brisk voice answered. Kowalski Financial Forensics. Diane, this is Amara Monroe. We met at the hospital fundraiser about 2 years ago. I don't know if you remember me, but... The pharmaceutical rep turned doctor's wife with the excellent taste in wine. Course I remember you, Amara. What can I do for you? Straight to business. Amara appreciated that. I need to know everything about my husband's finances. Bank accounts, investments, hidden assets, everything. And I need to know by Friday. There was a smile in Diane's voice when she responded. Finally leaving the bastard, are you? Good for you. Send me everything you have access to, his social security number, account numbers, anything. I'll start digging. And Amara, whatever you think you're going to find, it's probably worse. It always is. 3 days. Amara had given herself 3 days to gather information before confronting Gregory again. 3 days to build an unassailable case. 3 days to transform from victim to strategist. But there was one more thing she needed to do, something that both terrified and compelled her. She needed to see Bethany Courtland with her own eyes. If you want to see what Amara discovers next, make sure you're subscribed because this story is about to take a turn that will leave you speechless. The next afternoon, Amara did something completely out of character. She put on one of her nicer outfits, a cream-colored pantsuit that Gregory had always said made her look elegant, applied makeup with careful precision, and drove to Asheville Regional Medical Center. She carried a paper bag that supposedly contained lunch for her hard-working husband, playing the role of devoted wife one more time. The hospital was a place Amara knew well. She'd attended countless functions here, knew the layout, recognized faces in the corridors. She signed in at the front desk, smiled at the security guard who waved her through, and made her way toward the cardiology wing. But she didn't go to Gregory's office. Instead, she positioned herself in the main lobby area near the coffee shop, where she had a clear view of the surgical wing entrance. She didn't have to wait long. At 2:15, a young woman emerged from the surgical wing, still wearing scrubs, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was beautiful in that effortless way of someone who hadn't yet reached 30, with clear skin and bright eyes and the kind of confidence that came from being excellent at a difficult job. Bethany Courtland. Amara watched as Bethany ordered a latte, scrolling through her phone while she waited, smiling at something on her screen. Probably a text from Gregory. The barista called her name, and Bethany reached for her coffee, and that's when Amara saw it. On Bethany's left wrist, catching the fluorescent lighting as she moved, was a bracelet. A very specific bracelet. Platinum with small sapphires. Delicate and expensive and utterly distinctive. Amara's bracelet. The one Gregory had given her for their 25th anniversary. Presented in a Tiffany's box over dinner at their favorite restaurant. For 25 years of partnership, he'd said, fastening it around her wrist. Here's to 25 more. She'd worn it constantly for months until one day, about a year ago, she'd noticed it was missing. She'd torn apart the house looking for it, retraced her steps, called the restaurant and the dry cleaners and every place she'd been. Gregory had told her not to worry, that he'd buy her a new one, but she'd been devastated. That bracelet had meant something to her. Had represented a milestone in their marriage. And now it was on Bethany Cortland's wrist. He hadn't lost it. He'd taken it. He'd re-gifted her anniversary present to his mistress. The cruelty of it took Amara's breath away. This wasn't just about wanting someone younger. This was about erasing her, replacing her, treating their entire marriage like it was something disposable. Amara stood there in the hospital lobby, clutching a bag of lunch she had no intention of delivering, and felt something shift inside her. The last remnants of sadness, of hoping this could be salvaged, of wondering what she'd done wrong, all of it burned away in a flash of pure, cold fury. She took out her phone and photographed Bethany. Not obviously, just another woman checking her phone in a hospital lobby. But she made sure to capture the bracelet in the shot, the unmistakable glint of platinum and sapphire. Evidence, documentation, ammunition. Then Amara turned and walked out of the hospital without ever seeing her husband. She didn't need to. She'd seen everything she came to see. Have you ever had something precious stolen from you and given to someone else? How did you handle it? Tell us in the comments. Because Bethany Cortland had no idea that the elegant woman in the cream pantsuit had just photographed her wearing stolen property. Gregory had no idea that his wife was building a case against him with the precision of someone who'd once negotiated million-dollar pharmaceutical contracts. And neither of them had any idea what Diane Kowalski was about to uncover in Gregory's financial records. The 3 days Amara had given herself were ticking by, and with each passing hour, she was transforming from the woman Gregory thought he could discard into someone far more dangerous. Someone who'd been underestimated for the very last time. Friday morning arrived with the kind of clarity that only comes after a storm. Amara had barely slept for 3 nights, her mind cycling through possibilities and scenarios, but when her phone rang at 9 a.m. and Diane Kowalski's name appeared on the screen, she felt oddly calm. She'd been preparing for this moment, steeling herself for whatever truth was about to be revealed. Amara, it's Diane. I've finished my analysis. Are you somewhere you can talk privately? Amara was in her car, parked at an overlook on the Blue Ridge Parkway, far from the house where walls might have ears. I'm alone. Tell me everything. There was a pause, the kind of weighted silence that comes before devastating news. Amara, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen men hide money in offshore accounts, funnel cash through shell companies, create elaborate schemes to defraud their wives. But your husband, he didn't even bother to be clever about it. He's been draining your joint accounts for 8 months, and he's been so confident you wouldn't notice that he barely covered his tracks. Amara's hands tightened on the steering wheel. How much? $180,000 moved from your joint savings and investment accounts into a personal account in his name only. The transfers started small, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, but they escalated dramatically in the last 3 months. $40,000 in September alone. $180,000. Money that Amara had helped accumulate through careful budgeting, through sacrifice, through the life insurance policy from her father that she'd added to their joint savings. Money that was supposed to be their security, their retirement, their emergency fund. Where did it go? Diane's voice hardened. He bought Bethany Cortland a car. A brand new BMW X5, $58,000, registered in her name. He funded the down payment on a condo for her, a 2-bedroom place in the new development downtown, another $75,000. The rest went to jewelry, vacations, restaurants, a spending spree that would be almost impressive if it wasn't so stomach-turning. Amara felt something crack inside her chest, but her voice remained steady. What else? Oh, sweetheart, there's more. Your house, the one you've lived in for 23 years, the one you've meticulously maintained and improved. Gregory took out a second mortgage on it 6 months ago. $300,000. The world tilted. That's not possible. I would have had to sign. North Carolina requires both spouses to sign for a mortgage on a primary residence. You're absolutely right. Which is why I pulled the documents. Amara, that's your signature on the mortgage paperwork. Or rather, it's a very good forgery of your signature. I compared it to your actual signature on file with the bank, and there are discrepancies. The slant is wrong, the pressure points are different. Someone copied your signature, probably traced it from another document, but it's not authentic. Forgery. Gregory had forged her signature. This wasn't just infidelity, wasn't just betrayal. This was fraud. This was a crime. $300,000, Amara repeated, her voice hollow. Where is it? Most of it's already spent. More money for Bethany, furnishing the condo, a boat he bought and registered in his name only, some investments in a medical startup his friend is running. He's burned through most of it in 6 months. Amara, your husband has stolen nearly $500,000 from you, and if you don't act fast, he's going to empty whatever's left before the divorce is finalized. Amara stared out at the mountains, at the endless rolling peaks that had witnessed countless human dramas, and felt a strange sense of detachment. This was worse than she'd imagined. This wasn't a midlife crisis or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was systematic theft. This was premeditated financial abuse. Gregory had been planning to leave her for months, and he'd been making sure that when he did, he'd take everything with him. What do I do? You freeze everything. Today. Right now. You get a lawyer to file an emergency motion to freeze all marital assets. You file a police report for the forged signature. You document every single thing I found, and you make sure that when you walk into court, you have evidence that will destroy any sympathy the judge might have had for him. And Amara. Diane's voice softened. You stop being nice. You stop being understanding. Men like Gregory count on their wives being too shocked, too hurt, too conditioned to keep the peace. Don't give him that satisfaction. Amara thanked Diane, ended the call, and sat in her car overlooking the mountains her father had loved, the mountains she'd called home for 27 years, and felt the last piece of her old self fall away. Gregory had stolen from her. He'd forged her signature. He'd committed crimes against her while sleeping next to her, while accepting her care and her devotion, while letting her believe they were partners. She wasn't going to be nice anymore. That afternoon, Sienna's rental car pulled into the driveway. Amara watched from the kitchen window as her daughter emerged, tall and fierce in a power suit even on a Friday. Her dark hair pulled back in the same no-nonsense style she'd worn since law school. Sienna had told Gregory she was coming for a surprise visit, wanted to see her parents, needed a break from Seattle. He'd been delighted, mentioned something about taking her to dinner, showing off his successful daughter. He had no idea why she was really there. The moment they were alone, Sienna pulled her mother into a hug that lasted longer than usual, and when she pulled back, her eyes were blazing. Tell me everything. Every detail. I want to know exactly what that bastard has done. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd had countless family dinners, where Sienna had done her homework and Julian had built Lego structures and Gregory had read the newspaper over coffee. Amara laid out everything Diane had discovered, watching her daughter's face cycle through shock, fury, and cold calculation. He forged your signature, Sienna said, her lawyer voice taking over. That's not just grounds for divorce, Mom. That's criminal fraud. That's identity theft. We can have him prosecuted. I don't want him in prison, Amara said quietly. I want him to understand what he's lost. I want him to regret this for the rest of his life. Sienna's smile was sharp as a blade. Oh, he will. By the time we're done with him, he'll wish prison was his only problem. But Mom, we need to talk strategy. What assets do you have separate from him? Because if he's drained the joint accounts, we need to make sure you're not left with nothing. This was the moment. Amara took a breath and pulled out her laptop, navigating to her investment portfolio, and turned the screen toward her daughter. Sienna leaned forward, her eyes scanning the numbers, and Amara watched as her daughter's expression transformed from concern to shock to something like awe. Mom, is this real? $4.2 million. My father left me an inheritance 15 years ago. I invested it. Carefully. Separately. Your father doesn't know it exists. Sienna leaned back in her chair, a laugh escaping that was part disbelief, part admiration. You've been protecting yourself this whole time. All these years while he thought you were dependent on him, you've been building your own safety net. Mom, this is incredible. Does he have any idea? None whatsoever. Good. We keep it that way until the moment we need to reveal it. Let him think he's got all the power, that he's leaving you destitute. And then we show him exactly how wrong he is. Sienna opened her own laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. Okay, here's what we're dealing with. North Carolina is an equitable distribution state, which means marital property gets divided fairly, not necessarily equally. But here's the beautiful part, Mom. North Carolina is one of only a few states that still recognizes alienation of affection claims. What does that mean? Sienna's smile grew wider. It means you can sue Bethany Cortland for destroying your marriage. If we can prove that she knowingly engaged in an affair with a married man and that affair caused the breakdown of your marriage, you can sue her for damages. And given that she's a resident at Dad's hospital, that she's been accepting expensive gifts purchased with stolen marital funds, that she's wearing your anniversary bracelet. Mom, we have a case that could bury her. Amara thought of the young woman in the hospital lobby, so confident, so comfortable in her role as the other woman. Bethany had made choices too. She'd known Gregory was married, known he had a wife waiting at home, and she'd accepted jewelry and cars and a condo without apparently caring about the woman whose life she was helping to destroy. How much could we win? These cases can settle for hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions if the defendant has assets. Bethany probably doesn't have that kind of money, but you know who does? The hospital. If this becomes public, if it comes out that one of their surgical residents was having an affair with the chief of cardiology and accepting gifts purchased with fraudulently obtained funds, they'll want to settle to avoid the publicity. And Dad? Sienna's voice hardened. Dad will lose everything. His reputation, his position, possibly his medical license depending on how the ethics board sees this. If you're as shocked as Sienna is right now, hit that subscribe button because what happens next will blow your mind. Amara felt a twinge of something that might have been regret, but it passed quickly. Gregory had made his choices. He'd stolen from her, lied to her, betrayed her in every way possible. Whatever consequences came from his actions were his to bear. They spent the next 3 hours crafting strategy, Sienna making calls to lawyer friends, pulling up case law, building a framework that would protect Amara and devastate Gregory. By the time Gregory came home that evening, Sienna was all smiles, hugging her father, asking about his day, playing the role of devoted daughter while secretly holding the evidence that would destroy him. After dinner, which Amara had cooked with mechanical precision, Gregory suggested that he and Amara finally have that talk. Sienna excused herself, claiming she was tired from travel, but not before squeezing her mother's hand under the table in silent support. Gregory led Amara to his study, the room he'd always claimed as his private space, and gestured for her to sit in one of the chairs across from his desk. The power dynamic was deliberate, Amara realized. Him behind the desk in control. Her in the supplicant's chair, waiting to hear her fate. "I'm glad we can do this calmly," Gregory began, and his tone was so condescending that Amara had to clench her jaw to keep from reacting. "I know this has been difficult for you, Amara, but I think if we're both reasonable, We can work this out without a lot of drama or legal fees. I'm listening, Amara said, her voice neutral. Gregory pulled out a folder, and Amara recognized the letterhead of a law firm, expensive attorneys who handled divorces for Asheville's elite. He'd already had papers drawn up. Already had this planned out, down to the last detail. Here's what I'm proposing. You keep the house. It's paid off and you love it, and I think it's only fair that you have a place to live. I'll take my retirement accounts and investment portfolios, which makes sense since I earned them. We'll split the joint savings 50-50, though honestly, there's not much left there. The lie rolled off his tongue so smoothly that Amara almost admired the audacity. He'd stolen $180,000 and was now pretending the accounts were simply depleted. I'll pay you alimony for 5 years, Gregory continued. That should give you time to get back on your feet, maybe find work. I know it's been a long time since you worked, but you're still smart, still capable. Maybe you could do pharmaceutical sales again. I'm sure someone would hire you. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. Like her 27 years of sacrifice meant nothing. Like she was a problem to be solved. An obligation to be minimally fulfilled before he could move on to his shiny new life with his shiny young girlfriend. You haven't worked in decades, Gregory said, warming to his theme. I built everything we have. My career, my investments, my retirement. It's only fair that I keep what I've earned. But I'm willing to be generous, Amara. I'm willing to make sure you're taken care of, at least for a few years. He pushed the papers across the desk toward her. I had my attorney draw these up. It's all very straightforward, very fair. If you sign now, we can have this done quickly, quietly, without a lot of mess. Amara picked up the papers and read through them slowly, carefully, her face betraying nothing. The settlement he'd outlined would leave her with a house that had a secret $300,000 mortgage she'd supposedly agreed to, 5 years of minimal alimony, and half of joint accounts he'd already emptied. Meanwhile, Gregory would walk away with his retirement funds, his investment portfolios, and presumably the freedom to continue funding Bethany's lifestyle. It was, Amara thought distantly, one of the most insulting documents she'd ever read. She set the papers down and looked at her husband of 27 years. Really looked at him. And saw a stranger. A man so consumed with his own desires, so convinced of his own importance, that he genuinely believed this was fair. That he genuinely believed he'd built everything alone, that her contributions had been negligible, that she should be grateful for his generosity. I need a few days to review this with my attorney, Amara said calmly. Gregory's face relaxed, and he actually smiled. Of course. Take your time. I know this is a lot to process. But Amara, I really do think this is the best solution for both of us. You'll see. In a few months, when the dust settles, you'll realize this was the right thing. He reached across the desk like he was going to pat her hand, a gesture of false comfort, but Amara stood before he could touch her. She picked up the papers, held them carefully, and looked at Gregory with an expression he couldn't quite read. I appreciate you being so thorough, she said. I'll have my attorney review every detail. That's all I ask. I'm glad you're being mature about this, Amara. I was worried you might make things difficult, but you've always been reasonable. It's one of the things I've always admired about you. What would you do if your spouse handed you divorce papers that gave them everything while leaving you with nothing? Drop your answer in the comments. Amara walked out of Gregory's study with the insulting settlement papers clutched in her hand. And she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. Instead, she walked upstairs to where Sienna was waiting, showed her daughter the documents, and watched as Sienna's eyes widened with fury. He actually thinks you'll sign this. He actually thinks he can steal from you, forge your signature, drain your accounts, and then give you scraps while he keeps everything. Mom, we're going to destroy him. Yes, Amara said quietly. We are. Because Gregory Monroe had made a critical error. He'd assumed his wife was helpless. He'd assumed she had no options, no resources, no ability to fight back. He'd spent 27 years underestimating the woman who'd sacrificed everything for him, and he was about to discover that underestimation was the most expensive mistake of his life. In his study, Gregory poured himself a scotch and texted Bethany. "She's going to sign. This will all be over soon, and we can be together." He actually felt relieved, like he'd handled a difficult situation well, like he was a good guy for offering his soon-to-be ex-wife 5 years of alimony and a house he'd secretly mortgaged. He had no idea that upstairs, his wife and daughter were building a legal case that would strip him of his career, his reputation, and his freedom. He had no idea that the woman he'd dismissed as past her prime had $4.2 million he didn't know about. He had no idea that every theft, every forged signature, every gift to Bethany had been documented and would soon be presented to a judge. Gregory Monroe thought he'd won. He thought he'd successfully traded in his old life for a new one, like upgrading a car or a phone. What he didn't understand was that Amara Monroe had spent 3 days preparing for war, and the battle was about to begin. 3 days later, Amara stood in her living room arranging chairs in a careful semicircle. The morning light filtered through the windows she'd cleaned just that morning, not because they needed it, but because she'd needed something to do with her hands, some way to channel the nervous energy thrumming through her veins. This was it. The moment everything changed. The moment Gregory would discover that the woman he'd dismissed, the wife he'd stolen from, the partner he'd betrayed, was not the helpless victim he'd imagined. She'd texted Gregory that morning with a simple message. "Ready to finalize things. Can you come by the house at 2?" He'd responded within minutes, probably relieved that she was ready to sign his insulting settlement, probably already planning how he'd tell Bethany that he was finally free. He had no idea what was waiting for him. Sienna arrived first, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that made her look every inch the successful attorney she was. Behind her came 2 lawyers, Jessica Brennan and Robert Chen, partners at one of Asheville's most prestigious family law firms. Jessica specialized in high-asset divorces, and Robert's expertise was in financial fraud cases. They were expensive, they were ruthless, and they were exactly what Amara needed. At 1:55, Amara's laptop chimed with an incoming video call. Julian's face appeared on the screen, her son calling from his apartment in Barcelona where it was already 9 p.m. His dark eyes, so like his father's, were filled with a fury that Amara had never seen before. "Mom, I'm here. I've got the whole evening free. Let's do this." "Thank you for being here, sweetheart," Amara said softly. "It means everything." "Dad doesn't get to do this to you," Julian said, his voice tight. "He doesn't get to throw away our family and walk away like it means nothing." At precisely 2 o'clock, Gregory's car pulled into the driveway. Amara watched through the window as he emerged, checked his reflection in the car window, straightened his tie. He was wearing one of his best suits, she noticed. Probably had a celebration dinner planned with Bethany afterwards. The thought almost made her smile. The door opened and Gregory walked in with the confident stride of a man who believed he'd already won. But the moment he entered the living room and saw the assembled group, his footsteps faltered. Sienna standing by the fireplace, her face impassive. 2 lawyers he didn't recognize sitting on the sofa with briefcases open. Julian's face on the laptop screen, positioned on the coffee table. And Amara, standing in the center of it all, looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What is this?" Gregory's voice carried an edge of panic beneath the bluster. "Amara, I thought we were going to sign the papers. What are all these people doing here?" "Sit down, Gregory," Amara said, and her voice was so calm, so controlled, that it seemed to unsettle him more than shouting would have. "We need to talk." "I'm not sitting down until someone tells me what's going on." "Sienna, what are you doing here? I thought you went back to Seattle yesterday." "Dad, sit down," Sienna said, and there was steel in her voice that Gregory had apparently never heard from his daughter before. "You're going to want to be sitting for this." Gregory looked around the room, perhaps finally understanding that something had shifted, that the power dynamic he'd assumed was in place had somehow inverted without his knowledge. He sat, but on the edge of the chair, poised like he might bolt at any moment. Amara remained standing. She'd practiced this moment in her head 100 times over the last 3 days, rehearsed what she'd say, how she'd say it. But now that the moment had arrived, she found she didn't need the rehearsal. The facts spoke for themselves. Gregory, 3 days ago you presented me with a settlement agreement that you said was fair. You offered me the house, 5 years of minimal alimony, and half of our joint savings, which you claimed was mostly depleted. In exchange, you would keep your retirement accounts, your investment portfolios, and your freedom to pursue your relationship with Bethany Cortland without any messy complications. Gregory shifted in his seat. Yes, and I thought you were going to review it with your attorney and sign. That's why I'm here. I did review it, Amara said. Very thoroughly. And in the process of that review, I hired a forensic accountant to examine our financial situation. Would you like to know what she found? The color started to drain from Gregory's face. You hired a what? Amara, that's a violation of privacy. You can't just... Dad! Sienna's voice cut through his protest like a knife. You'll have your turn to speak. Right now, you're going to listen. Gregory's mouth snapped shut, and Amara saw the exact moment he realized that his daughter was not on his side, that whatever alliance he'd assumed existed between them had been shattered by his own actions. Amara nodded to Jessica, who pulled out a folder and began distributing copies of documents to everyone in the room. Over the past 8 months, you've systematically drained our joint accounts of $180,000. You moved that money into a personal account in your name only, an account I didn't know existed. That money was used to purchase a BMW for Bethany Cortland, to fund a down payment on a condo in her name, to buy jewelry, to finance vacations, and to generally fund your affair. That's not true, I didn't. Don't interrupt, Amara said, and her voice was so cold that Gregory actually flinched. I have bank statements, transfer records, receipts, and purchase orders documenting every single transaction. Your forensic accountant wasn't nearly as careful as you thought she'd need to be, because you assumed I'd never look. You assumed I was too stupid, too trusting, or too beaten down to question you. She pulled out another set of documents. But that's not the worst of it, is it, Gregory? 6 months ago you took out a second mortgage on our house. Our house, the one we've lived in for 23 years. The one you so generously offered to let me keep in the settlement. You borrowed $300,000 against it. The problem is, North Carolina law requires both spouses to sign mortgage documents on a primary residence. So how did you manage to get a mortgage without my signature? Gregory had gone completely white. Amara, I can explain. You forged my signature, Amara continued, as if he hadn't spoken. You traced my signature from another document, probably from our joint tax returns, and you committed fraud, identity theft, federal crimes, Gregory. Also, you could steal more money from our marriage to spend on your girlfriend. Robert Chen, the fraud attorney, leaned forward. Dr. Monroe, I've reviewed the mortgage documents. The signature is demonstrably false, and we have handwriting analysis to prove it. You're looking at criminal charges for forgery, fraud, and theft of marital assets. Gregory stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is ridiculous. I'm not going to sit here and be accused of crimes by my own wife. Amara, if you'd just been reasonable, if you'd just accepted my offer, none of this would be necessary. Sit down, Dad. Julian's voice came from the laptop speakers, tight with controlled rage. You don't get to run away from this. You don't get to play the victim when you're the one who destroyed our family. Gregory looked at his son's face on the screen, and something in Julian's expression made him sink back into his chair. There's more, Amara said, and now she allowed herself a small smile. You see, Gregory, you made a fundamental miscalculation about me. You assumed that because I gave up my career to support yours, because I stayed home with our children, because I played the role of devoted wife for 27 years, that I was completely dependent on you. That I had nothing of my own. That I would have no choice but to accept whatever scraps you offered. She nodded to Jessica, who pulled out another document and placed it in front of Gregory. 15 years ago, my father died and left me an inheritance. $800,000. You knew about the inheritance, of course. You were at the reading of the will. But what you didn't know is that I kept that money separate. I invested it, carefully, strategically, over 15 years. And while you were focused on your career and apparently on planning your exit strategy, I was building my own financial security. Gregory picked up the document with shaking hands. It was a portfolio summary, showing assets totaling $4.2 million, all in Amara's name only. $4.2 million, Amara said softly. Money you knew nothing about. Money you can't touch. So while you thought I was helpless, while you thought you held all the power, I was protecting myself. I was preparing for the possibility that one day, the man I loved might decide I wasn't worth keeping. If you want to see Gregory's reaction to what comes next, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. Gregory stared at the portfolio summary like it was written in a foreign language. This can't be real. $4 million. You've been hiding $4 million from me. I wasn't hiding it, Gregory. I was investing my separate property. Money my father left specifically to me, not to us. Money I had every legal right to keep private. But you're right to be concerned about it, because it changes everything about the settlement you proposed. Jessica took over, her voice crisp and professional. Dr. Monroe, your settlement offer was predicated on the assumption that your wife had no assets and no income-earning potential. That assumption was incorrect. Your wife is not only financially independent, she's significantly wealthier than you are, especially after you've squandered nearly $500,000 of marital assets on your mistress. Don't call her that, Gregory snapped. Bethany is not. Bethany Cortland is a 29-year-old surgical resident who has been knowingly engaging in an affair with a married man, Sienna cut in. She's been accepting expensive gifts purchased with stolen money, including a bracelet that belonged to my mother, a 25th anniversary gift that you took and regifted like it meant nothing. She's living in a condo you paid for with fraudulently obtained funds. And in the state of North Carolina, that makes her liable for an alienation of affection lawsuit. Gregory's eyes widened. You can't sue Bethany. She didn't do anything wrong. Actually, we can, Robert said. North Carolina is one of only 6 states that still recognizes alienation of affection as a valid cause of action. If we can prove that Ms. Cortland knowingly engaged in an affair with a married man, and that this affair caused the breakdown of the marriage, Mrs. Monroe can sue for damages. And given the evidence we have, texts, photos, financial records showing the gifts you purchased for her, we have an excellent case. Amara watched as the full weight of the situation began to dawn on Gregory. Here's what's actually going to happen, Gregory. We're going to sell the house, pay off the fraudulent mortgage you took out, and split whatever equity remains 50-50. All marital assets, including your retirement accounts and investment portfolios, will be divided equitably under North Carolina law. But here's the part one don't think you've considered. I'm filing a separate civil suit against you for financial fraud. The forged signature, the stolen funds, the deliberate depletion of marital assets. I'm also filing an alienation of affection suit against Bethany Cortland for $300,000. You can't do this, Gregory said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Amara, please, if you do this, everyone will know. The hospital, my colleagues, the whole medical community. It will destroy my reputation. Yes, Amara said simply. It will. I'll fight this. I'll fight all of it. You can't prove any of this. Robert slid another folder across the coffee table. Actually, Dr. Monroe, we can prove all of it. We have forensic accounting records, bank statements, handwriting analysis of the forged signature, testimony from Ms. Cortland's neighbors who've seen you coming and going from her condo, photos of her wearing Mrs. Monroe's jewelry, and text messages between you and Ms. Cortland discussing your plans to divorce your wife. We have everything we need to win in court, and to make sure that when we do win, the details become part of the public record. Gregory's face had gone from white to gray. He looked at Amara with something that might have been desperation. Amara, please. We can work this out. We don't need to destroy each other. Think about Sienna and Julian. Think about what this will do to them. Don't you dare, Julian's voice came from the laptop, shaking with fury. Don't you dare use us as an excuse. You did this, Dad. You cheated, you lied, you stole from Mom, and now you want to play the family card. We know what you did. Sienna told me everything. And you know what? I'm glad Mom is fighting back. I'm glad she's not letting you walk all over her. Sienna moved to stand beside her mother, a united front. Dad, you have two choices. You can sign the settlement agreement we've prepared, which gives Mom 50% of all marital assets, requires you to repay the stolen funds, and includes an agreement that you will not contest the civil suits. Or you can refuse, and we take this to court, where every detail of your affair, your fraud, and your embezzlement becomes public knowledge. Gregory exploded out of his chair, his composure finally shattering completely. This is insane. I'm not signing away everything I've worked for because of some midlife mistake. Amara, you're being vindictive and cruel. This isn't like you. Amara stood and walked over to her husband, close enough that she could see the panic in his eyes, the realization that he'd miscalculated catastrophically. You're right, Gregory. This isn't like me. The old me would have cried and begged you to stay. The old me would have blamed herself and wondered what she did wrong. The old me would have signed your insulting settlement and spent the rest of her life struggling while you played house with your girlfriend. But that woman doesn't exist anymore. You killed her when you forged my signature. You killed her when you gave my anniversary bracelet to another woman. You killed her when you decided that 27 years of partnership meant nothing. She stepped back, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper but somehow carrying more weight than if she'd shouted. You can sign these papers or we can go to court. Either way, your colleagues will know you forged documents and embezzled marital funds. The hospital board will be very interested in a chief of cardiology with integrity issues. Medical licenses have been revoked for less, Gregory. And Bethany. Once she realizes you're not the wealthy, successful doctor she thought you were. Once she realizes being with you means being dragged through a public lawsuit. How long do you think she'll stick around? What would you do in Amara's position? Would you seek revenge or try to move on quietly? Tell us in the comments. Gregory stood there, surrounded by lawyers and evidence and the children he'd betrayed. And for the first time in perhaps his entire adult life, he had no power, no control, no way out. He looked at the woman he'd been married to for 27 years, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. Someone strong and cold and absolutely unmovable. How long do I have to decide? His voice was barely audible. You can sign now, or my attorneys will file the paperwork on Monday morning, Jessica said. The civil suits will be filed regardless, but if you sign now and agree not to contest them, we can keep the details relatively private. If you force us to go to court, everything becomes public record. Gregory slumped back into his chair, the fight draining out of him like air from a punctured tire. He'd wanted to trade in his wife for a younger model, wanted to start fresh with someone who made him feel alive. He'd thought it would be easy, thought Amara would be grateful for whatever he offered, thought he could walk away from 27 years with his reputation intact and his bank account full. Instead, he was staring at documents that would cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars, ruin his professional reputation, and expose him as a fraud and a thief. The man who wanted to leave his wife for a younger woman was now facing financial ruin and career destruction, all because he'd underestimated the woman he thought he knew. Where do I sign? Gregory asked, and the defeat in his voice was absolute. Amara felt no triumph in that moment. No satisfaction in his collapse. Just a cold, clear certainty that she'd done what needed to be done. That she'd protected herself the way her father had taught her. The way no one else would. Gregory had made his choices, and now he would live with the consequences. As he picked up the pen with shaking hands and began signing his name to documents that would dismantle the life he'd tried to build on lies and theft, Amara turned to look out the window at the mountains beyond. The same mountains that had watched her arrive in Asheville as a young bride, full of hope and love and dreams of partnership. The same mountains that were now witnessing the end of that dream and the beginning of something else entirely. Something that belonged only to her. The pen hovers over the document for what feels like an eternity. Gregory's hand trembles, not from weakness, but from the crushing weight of total defeat. This is the moment. The moment a man realizes he gambled everything on a pair of twos and lost it all. His signature scratches across the page, each letter a confession of his spectacular failure. The sound of that pen might as well be a gavel coming down, sealing his fate. He stands slowly, avoiding eye contact, ready to slink away with whatever scraps of dignity he can salvage. But Amara isn't done. Not yet. She's waited 27 years to say what needs to be said, and she's going to say it now. I would have fought for us, Gregory. The words stop him cold. He freezes mid-step, still facing the door, because even now, even after everything, he can't look at her. If you'd just been honest, Amara continues, her voice steady but carrying the weight of nearly 3 decades. If you'd told me you were unhappy, if you'd said you were struggling, we could have tried. We could have gone to therapy. We could have talked. We could have fought for what we built together. Her words aren't angry anymore. They're sadder than that. They're the sound of a woman mourning what could have been. But you chose deception. You chose to steal from me. You chose to disrespect 27 years of partnership, of sacrifice, of love. You treated me like I was nothing. Like everything I gave, everything I built, everything I sacrificed. It all meant nothing to you. Gregory's shoulders sag, but still he doesn't turn around. Maybe he can't. Maybe the shame is too heavy. And then Amara delivers the final blow. Not out of cruelty, but out of truth. The saddest part, Gregory. Bethany doesn't love you. She never did. She loves what you can give her, the lifestyle, the status, the money. And now, Amara's voice drops to barely above a whisper. Now you have nothing left to give. Silence. Pure, devastating silence. Gregory's hand rests on the door handle for a moment. Just a moment. As if he might say something, might defend himself, might apologize. But he doesn't. Because what is there to say? Every word Amara spoke is the absolute truth. And they both know it. The door opens. The door closes. And Gregory walks out of Amara's life the same way he treated their marriage. Without a word, without dignity, without honor. 3 months later. The morning sun streams through floor-to-ceiling windows, painting everything in shades of gold and possibility. Amara stands in her new condo. Smaller than the house, yes, but it's hers. Every piece of furniture she chose. Every painting on the wall reflects her taste. Not a compromise. And that view. The mountains rising in the distance, snow-capped and majestic. That view is worth every battle she fought. The doorbell rings, and Sienna bursts in with coffee and the kind of energy that only comes from carrying absolutely delicious gossip. Okay, so you're not going to believe this, Sienna announces, setting down the cups and grinning like the Cheshire Cat. Gregory and Bethany broke up. Amara raises an eyebrow. Did they now? Girl, it gets better. Apparently, once Gregory couldn't maintain her lifestyle. The shopping trips, the fancy restaurants, the designer everything. Bethany suddenly discovered she wasn't as in love as she thought. Shocking, I know. Sienna's sarcasm is thick enough to cut with a knife. Amara sips her coffee, and there's the tiniest smile playing at the corners of her lips. Not vindictive. Not cruel. Just satisfied. I tried to tell him. Oh, but wait, there's more. Sienna leans forward, clearly enjoying this. Gregory lost his position as chief of cardiology. Took a demotion to avoid a full-blown scandal. The hospital board wasn't thrilled about the divorce mess and the questions about his judgment. So now he's just a regular cardiologist. No corner office. No administrative power. No prestige. If you're loving Amara's comeback story and want to see more powerful narratives about people reclaiming their power, hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Amara processes this information with the calm of someone who's already won. I'm not going to pretend I feel bad for him. He made his choices. And speaking of choices, Sienna adds, how's the consulting gig going? Better than expected. Amara's eyes light up. Genuine excitement, the kind she hasn't felt in years. Turns out, Pharmaceutical companies are willing to pay very well for someone who understands both the medical and business sides of healthcare. All those years building Gregory's network. All those hospital events I organized. All those relationships I maintained. They're finally working for me. As if on cue, Amara's laptop chimes with a video call. Julian's face fills the screen, calling from his dorm room, textbooks scattered behind him. Mom. There she is, the legend herself. Amara laughs, really laughs. What are you talking about? Are you kidding? Dad's colleagues' kids are at school here. Word gets around. Everyone knows you took him to the cleaners and came out a boss. You're like a folk hero for people with terrible dads. Julian. Amara tries to sound disapproving but can't stop smiling. No, seriously, Mom. I'm proud of you. You could have just taken whatever settlement he offered and disappeared. But you fought. You won. And now you're building something that's all yours. That's incredible. After the call ends, Amara walks out onto her balcony, coffee in hand, and watches the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of pink and orange. The air is crisp and clean, and for the first time in longer than she can remember, Amara feels like she can breathe fully. The old Amara would have been afraid of this moment. The silence, the solitude, the uncertainty of starting over at 50. But this Amara, she's not afraid at all. Because here's what she's learned. She didn't lose 27 years. She invested them. She learned. She grew. She built skills, relationships, and strength she didn't even know she had. And yes, Gregory tried to take everything from her. But he couldn't take her experience. He couldn't take her resilience. He couldn't take the woman she became through fire. I spent 27 years building someone else's dream, Amara thinks, watching the sun climb higher, turning the world golden. Now I'm building my own. And I'm not starting over. I'm starting fresh with everything I've learned and everything I've earned. 27 years wasn't a waste. It was preparation. And now the real story begins. Amara smiles. Not the careful, performative smile she wore as the chief of cardiology's wife. This smile is different. It's real. It's free. It's hers. And she's not looking back. Here's a question for you. If you were in Amara's position, would you have fought for the marriage, or would you have walked away the moment you discovered the betrayal? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you think.